I woke up to what looked like a crime scene in my front yard, but instead of blood, it was pumpkin guts, thick, orange, and splattered across my lawn like some twisted Halloween slaughter. My prized pumpkin patch, the one I'd spent months tending, was utterly demolished. Stems were broken, vines torn from the soil, and the biggest pumpkin of them all, the one I'd nicknamed Big Jack, was reduced to a sad, unrecognizable heap of mush. The sharp smell of raw pumpkin hung in the air, mixing with the damp morning dew. And there, smack in the middle of the wreckage, I found it, the murder weapon. A metal rake, its prongs coated in pumpkin residue, abandoned right by the sidewalk. I knew instantly who was behind it. Lydia Grayson, the iron-fisted queen of the HOA, a woman who ruled our neighborhood like her personal fiefdom, crushing anything that dared to bring a shred of happiness. Lydia had a reputation. Christmas lights? Banned. Kids' lemonade stands? Shut down. Even the old guy down the street who played guitar on his porch got a cease and desist notice. So when I planted a pumpkin patch for the community's fall festival, I should have seen it coming. Her wrath was inevitable. The signs had been piling up, the increasingly hostile violation notices stuffed in my mailbox, the icy stares as she cruised past my house, the HOA meetings where she'd rant about how pumpkins were a slippery slope to property value chaos. Still, I never thought she'd go full-on psycho and stage a midnight veggie massacre. But she had, and now, standing there with my hands on my hips, staring at the carnage, something inside me clicked. I wasn't just going to sweep this under the rug or start over quietly. No, if Lydia thought she could smash my pumpkin patch and walk away unscathed, she was in for a rude awakening. It all started a few months back when I decided to do something nice for the neighborhood. I'd moved in the year before, and though I wasn't exactly Mr. Social, I liked the idea of building some community spirit. So I turned my front yard into a pumpkin patch, inviting local kids to help plant and water the seeds. Every morning before work, I'd check on them, watching the little sprouts grow into something I was genuinely proud of. The kids loved it, their parents were grateful, and even my gruff next-door neighbor, old Mr. Hargrove, grudgingly admitted it was a decent damn patch. But Lydia? She despised it from the jump. At first, she played it cool, showing up one evening with her jet-black hair pulled into a tight bun, clutching her HOA clipboard like a weapon. "Tom," she'd said in that fake sweet tone that always meant trouble, "I'm afraid your yard violates our community aesthetic standards." I'd blinked at her, one eyebrow cocked. How's a pumpkin patch a violation? She'd pursed her lips like she'd bitten into something sour. It disrupts the neighborhood's uniformity. I'd glanced around at the rows of beige houses, each with their cookie-cutter hedges and lifeless lawns. "Right?" I'd said dryly. "Wouldn't want to mess up all this excitement." Her eyes had narrowed. "You'll need to remove it immediately." I'd grinned. "Yeah, that's not happening." That was the spark that ignited our war. From then on, she escalated. Violation notices, fines, HOA meetings where she'd rail against rogue landscaping. I ignored it all. The pumpkins flourished, growing bigger and bolder, almost like they were taunting her. And Lydia's fury grew right along with them. Then, last week, she'd kicked it up a notch. At the monthly HOA meeting, her face flushed with rage, she'd stood up and declared, "This is chaos. If we let this pumpkin patch stand, what's next? Pigs? Cows? A barnyard in suburbia? Are we civilized or savages?" Someone coughed awkwardly. The treasurer, a quiet guy named Greg, had mumbled, "I don't think pumpkins are exactly livestock." She'd rounded on him like a hawk spotting prey. "You don't think, Greg? Well, I don't think your tacky birdhouse collection fits this neighborhood, but you don't see me making a scene, do you?" Greg shrank in his chair. I'd leaned back, arms crossed, and said, "Sounds like you just hate joy, Lydia." That was the breaking point. And now, here I was, staring at the ruins of my pumpkin patch, a battlefield of orange guts and broken dreams. Lydia had won this round, but I was about to turn the tables. I stormed inside, yanked the HOA bylaws off my shelf, and started reading. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd beat her at her own game. It didn't take long to find gold, a loophole so perfect it felt like fate. The bylaws had a community enrichment event clause. Homeowners could host events to boost neighborhood morale, no limit on attendees. A slow grin spread across my face. If Lydia thought she'd erased my pumpkins, she was dead wrong. In 1 week, I'd throw the biggest, loudest, most in-your-face pumpkin party this neighborhood had ever seen, and she'd be powerless to stop me. The second I spotted that loophole, I knew I had her cornered. She'd smash my pumpkins, thinking she'd snuffed out my rebellion, but she'd just given me the perfect excuse to go all out. The rule was crystal clear. Community events were fair game as long as they fostered togetherness and lifted spirits. What's more spirit-lifting than a good old-fashioned pumpkin bash? Better yet, since my patch was toast, I'd have to bring in pumpkins from elsewhere. No unauthorized gardening for her to nitpick. I was about to use her own rules to make this the neighborhood's biggest spectacle yet. I didn't waste a minute. That night, I made calls. First up was a buddy who ran a farm just outside town. He owed me one after I'd helped him haul his ancient tractor last summer. When I told him what Lydia had done, he laughed and promised a truckload of pumpkins delivered straight to my yard. Next, I hit up some local businesses, a cider maker, a pie baker, even a guy with a hayride gig. Within an hour, they were all in. Turns out, I wasn't the only one fed up with Lydia's reign of terror. The community was ready to rally. The next morning, I got busy. I printed flyers, posted in the neighborhood's online group, and spread the word at the local coffee shop, where gossip travels faster than light. Free pumpkins for everyone. I announced. Bring the kids, grab some cider and pie. Let's celebrate fall the right way. The response was instant. Neighbors who'd barely nodded at me before were suddenly all smiles, promising to show up with their families. Even the barista, who usually glared at the world before noon, gave me a nod of approval. By the time the event was locked in, I had a small army behind me. The moms were thrilled. Finally, something fun for their kids that didn't need HOA approval. The dads, many with their own Lydia grudges, were pumped, some even volunteering to help set up. Even Mr. Hargrove clapped me on the shoulder and growled. About time someone stuck it to that woman. Lydia caught wind of it fast. Within hours, she marched over in her signature pressed slacks and a sweater so stiff it could have stood on its own. She didn't bother with small talk. "This isn't happening," she snapped, waving one of my flyers like it was a smoking gun. "You're not turning this neighborhood into a zoo." I leaned against my porch railing, sipping coffee. "Actually, Lydia, I am. And it's all within HOA guidelines." She scoffed. "No way. You can't just invite the whole town here." "Oh, but I can," I said, grinning. "It's a community enrichment event, neighborly bonding, morale boosting, all backed by the bylaws." "You know the bylaws, right?" Her face turned a furious shade of red. "That's not what they're for. Matter of opinion," I said lightly. "But don't worry, it's all legit. No unapproved structures, no sales on private property, just pumpkins and good vibes. The HOA can't touch it." She opened her mouth, then snapped it shut, her jaw clenching so hard I thought she'd crack a tooth. I could see her scrambling for a counterattack. Finally, she hissed, "I'll file a complaint." "Go for it," I said. "Oh, and watch your step. My security cameras caught some interesting footage the other night. Someone sneaking onto my property with a rake. I'm not saying I'll press charges, but I'm not saying I won't." For a second, I thought she'd combust. Her eyes bulged, her hands twitched, and I half expected her to snatch my coffee and hurl it at me. But then she pulled herself together, spat, "This isn't over," and stormed off. I watched her go, shaking my head. Of course it wasn't over. Lydia didn't lose quietly. Over the next few days, she went full throttle. First, a mass email to the neighborhood, claiming my event was unauthorized and disruptive. No one cared. Then, a preemptive noise complaint for an event that hadn't even started, shot down flat. In a last-ditch move, she called an emergency HOA meeting, delivering a melodramatic speech about the perils of uncontrolled gatherings. It was almost impressive if it wasn't so absurd. Someone recorded it and posted it online. Within hours, it was racking up likes and comments. HOA tyrant meltdown, she needs a life, and my favorite, is this a meeting or a supervillain origin story? By the time event day arrived, the neighborhood was electric with excitement. Families set up blankets, kids raced around with pie-smeared faces, and my yard became a sea of orange and laughter. Everything Lydia loathed. Right on cue, she showed up with her final gambit, the HOA lawyer. She strode onto my lawn like a general, heels clicking, with a suit-clad guy toting a briefcase behind her. I knew her play. She'd try to nail me with some obscure technicality. This event violates HOA rules, she declared, loud enough for everyone to hear. It's disruptive, unapproved, and misuses community space. I took a slow sip of cider, then faced her. Check the bylaws again, Lydia. This is a legal community enrichment event, public, participatory, morale-boosting. All allowed. She smirked, turning to the lawyer. He adjusted his tie and pulled out a folder. Mr. Reese, while community events are permitted, large gatherings have rules. Any violation, and the HOA can shut it down. I nodded, then pulled my own folder from my back pocket. Good thing I double-checked everything. Even had a lawyer review it. I handed him my stack: permits, noise compliance, liability waivers. He flipped through, frowning. These are in order, he muttered. Yep, I said, grinning at Lydia. City approved, no loose ends. Wouldn't want to be sloppy. Her jaw tightened. It's still a nuisance. Laughter erupted from the crowd. Her claim was laughable amid the joy around us. Even the lawyer shifted awkwardly, sensing the tide. Then, Lydia did the unthinkable. She marched to my electrical panel, yanked it open, and before anyone could react, flipped the main breaker. A loud snap, then silence. The music died, the lights went dark, the festival's hum vanished. She stood there, chest heaving, like she'd just saved the world. Then porch lights down the street started flickering off. 1, 2, 3. Gasps spread as it hit everyone. She'd blacked out the whole neighborhood. Her smug look faltered. Mr. Hargrove started a slow, mocking clap. Well, he drawled. Looks like our HOA president just took out the block. Laughter swelled. Kids cheered. Lydia, pale, fumbled with the panel, but it was too late. The lawyer edged away, closing his folder. I'd won. The utility company got swamped with calls. A tech arrived, smirking when he heard the HOA president caused the blackout over a pumpkin party. Power came back, but Lydia was gone, slunk off like a defeated villain. The fallout was swift. A petition to oust her circulated, and at the next meeting, she was unanimously voted out. She quit the board entirely, and word was she might move. For me, the festival was a triumph. A neighbor slipped a note under my door. Best thing here in years. Keep it up. The kids begged for another patch next year, and with their hopeful faces, I couldn't say no. So, come spring, I planted double the pumpkins. This time, no one dared stop me. Lydia crushed my patch, but in the end, she was the one who got crushed.